This week I got to talk with Melanie Anagnos about her noir 70s thriller Nightswimming, which is book one in the Jamie Palmieri series. And it was such a fun conversation. Halley was a part of the interview as well. She was an early reader of this, and so it just seemed perfect to do the interview together. But here's what it's about. Paterson, New Jersey, 1979. Jamie Palmieri is an up-and-coming patrol officer 3 years out of the academy and frustrated with his slow rise to detective. That all changes one frigid night in January when a double homicide at a local bar leaves the owner and young woman dead. In the wake of the Rubin Hurricane Carter proceedings and the city's lingering distrust for the police, Jamie is told to expect a no-one-saw-a-thing investigation. But as Jamie traces a series of small leads, he's sent on a path where the tables turn suddenly, with the still unknown killer now stalking Jamie and the people he's closest to. A classic police procedural charged with the social turbulence of the 1970s. So Melanie also has a Substack that is in the show notes, where she writes about 70s culture, and you can tell how much she knows about that time with how immersive this story is. Like, you feel like you are in 1979, you feel like you are in New Jersey, you just feel all of it. We dive into how reading Nordic noir shaped how she wrote this book, and which parts of that genre she kept and the ones that she kind of played against and chose to go a little bit of a different route. That being said, let's hear from Melanie. I am super excited for this interview. There's a kind of cool story to this one. So I got an email that said a noir that Halley Sutton calls, and then it said Halley's blurb. And I was like, hey, I know her. And so then when I responded, I obviously found out that Halley read Nightswimming and just really, really loved it. So I thought it would be cool to have Melanie and Halley here together to talk about it. So I'm excited to talk with both of you.
Oh, I love talking, especially noir with Halley, because
Yes.
that's such an interesting. Whenever we chat, it's really I learned so much.
Same, honestly.
That's very kind. I'm so excited to talk with you, Melanie, about Nightswimming, a book I absolutely loved and which just came out, and hear more about your process of writing it, and mention your absolutely wonderful Substack, Cherchez la Femme, which if anyone isn't aware of, you should absolutely subscribe to.
Yeah. So that plays into the book. So I guess we could also kind of just talk about that kind of from the beginning. So this book takes place in the 70s, in 1979. And your Substack heavily focuses on that time period as well. So did you always love that time period? What kind of brought you to like knowing so much about it and then eventually setting a noir there?
So there's a lot. There's a lot to that answer. The I guess the short answer is I was doing research for the novel, and although I know a lot about the 70s, to get the granular just background and just familiarize myself, I went back there, and I happened upon two issues of Playboy. The media attention in the late 1970s. And it really interested me the way that the media was treating one issue versus the other, which was the anniversary issue was a huge media event. But there really wasn't a lot of pushback from feminists. And I mean, this was like, it was on television, it was on network television, it was all over the newspapers. And then the same year, Playboy decided to do their first Ivy League issue. They would recruit women from different colleges, and they decided to concentrate on the Ivy Leagues. And that the feminists went crazy. And the disparity in the treatment was really so interesting to me. And I really honestly never thought twice about Playboy. I'm not interested. It just, some people find it interesting. It just really was never interesting to me. But that was very interesting to me. And I started doing research, and I had a long form essay and no home for it. And Lee Stein has been an editor that I've worked with, and she convinced me to put out a Substack, because otherwise the essay was just going to sit in my computer, and I'm not a social media person. So I thought, my greatest fear in life is that I'm going to post something and people are going to say mean things. So why would I write this controversial essay and put it out on Substack? But that's what I ended up doing. And once I started posting on Substack and I serialized the essay, and once that finished, I just thought I would continue until I had, no more material.
Yeah. That's so cool.
So how did that inform the book, The Nightswimming and Jamie Palmieri? I mean, can you talk a little bit about, like, has there been cross flow between the two? I mean, obviously your research plays into your writing.
Mm-hmm.
So regarding the Substack, but in particular, the long form essay had a lot to do with, the narrative around women and how that was changing in the 1970s. And I thought it would be really interesting for the male perspective, because I like the grainy middle ground, not the people who were, just the misogynists in the world and the people who immediately understood feminism and, were 100% on board. But, people, young men in the middle, particularly in a very, traditionally male atmosphere, such as a police station. And how would that play out? So that, so it was those kinds of themes of how the gender narratives were changing in the 1970s, and it's been an evolution, and one step forward, two step back kind of thing.
Yeah. I also read an article that you wrote about writing this, where you were talking about how you kind of wanted to almost write like Nordic noir, but in America, obviously. And I thought that was so fascinating. So was that something you've kind of always wanted to dive into, that genre, or did it just like feel kind of like that it would fit what you wanted to write the best?
It sort of, they were like two paths that crossed. I was writing the book and I knew what I wanted to do, and I was just really beginning to get into Nordic noir. And that is very much known for how place and culture is really defining. The crime is, very much integrated into the culture. And I wanted to do more about the culture than just like, here's the city it takes place in.
Yeah.
And so that really gave me a roadmap on how to do that.
Yeah.
So to that end, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was one of the things that kind of like looms large in the background of Nightswimming and in Paterson 1979 is Rubin the Hurricane Carter. And I was curious about how was that something you always knew you wanted to incorporate, or like what was that something, because it affects basically how everyone speaks to police in the book and like whether communities are willing to come forward. And I'm just curious about that. And at what point did that become a part of writing the book for you?
It was sort of after the fact. It was, when I say after the fact, after I had the initial concept of the book, and I thought about, well, I'm writing about the police in Paterson. It would be ludicrous to not think about Hurricane Carter. On the other hand, I didn't, sorry, I just got a strange pop-up from Google, which is I had to install for this podcast. But going back to Hurricane Carter. So basically, I knew that I had to address it, but I didn't want it to be about Hurricane Carter, because that's obviously a subject unto itself. So I had to think about, well, I must mention it, I must think about it, and how is that organic to the story? Which would be that in a urban situation, because you used to have community policing and, trust in the police, and how was that changing? How was Paterson changing in the 1970s? That was what was going on with me. So yeah, with respect to Hurricane Carter, I think that's always an issue when you have like a larger cultural, I guess, phenomena or something in the culture that's really big, but you don't want it to take over the narrative.
Right. And for anybody, hopefully people know the reference, but if you don't, can you do like a short rundown of Hurricane Carter, of what that was?
Okay, so in 1965 there was a multi. I think it was three people who were murdered at the Lafayette Bar and Grill in Paterson, New Jersey, and witnesses had described a getaway car and Hurricane Carter, Rubin Hurricane Carter, who was a boxer at the time, and I think the other gentleman was John Artis, I think his name was.
Mm-hmm.
The two men, and they were both black, and they were arrested, and there was problems with the prosecution, and it went back and forth from the state courts to the federal courts. But there was a lot of allegations of police and prosecutorial misconduct, and it became very famous. Bob Dylan had written a song about it. Eventually, I think Denzel Washington was in a film. So it really was on the radar in Paterson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing that I've kind of been wanting to ask about too is, so there's that going on. There's kind of like that distrust or tension with that as well. But then in the noir sense as well, something that I enjoyed was that our main character is still kind of hopeful, and so like you kind of, with noir, there's always like a lot of cynicism, which I'm all for that every now and then, of course, too. But I did like that, like he really felt like he could make a positive impact still, basically, or you get what I'm saying. So did you go into it knowing that that was how you wanted his character to be, or did that kind of come as you wrote it?
Well, I think I always love character-driven fiction, whatever the genre, and so that was, I'd never written a police procedural, so that was very challenging to me, to be sure. But I felt a real obligation to the genre, and I didn't want to overstep, my bounds, being new to the genre and just, ignore, the tropes. And so I wanted to lean into the genre. And you do have often a young male, often a loner. But I wanted to think about that. Well, why was he alone? Did he want to be alone? Was that a comfortable, place for him? So I used the structure of the police procedural, and I was, very close to it. But I thought that there were still things that I could do with it and make it the character-driven piece that I wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
How did you do that research for the police procedural? I'm personally very intimidated about writing a procedural because of all of the research that would go into it. So I'm curious to hear about your process with it.
Well, it's funny because I was listening to some of the back episodes, and Kate, you had said that you hate when you talk to an author and they say, well, where did you have the idea for this? And they say, oh, I don't know. It just came to me. I thought, oh my God, because this just came to me. I don't know. She's going to ask me this question. So I really don't have a great story for how I started this, but I do remember the exact moment that I thought, oh my God, I'm so over my head. This is such a bad idea. And what I did is I had looked up online just books about, police procedure. And I happened on, I think his name is Patrick O'Donnell, and he does a podcast called Cops and Writers. And he has guests, and they will talk about, it's usually former police, and they'll just, talk about their, how their experiences. And then the other podcast that I listen to a lot is called Small Town Dicks. And that's, and I love this because it's the woman who, Yardley Smith, is the voice of Lisa Simpson on The Simpsons.
Yeah. Amazing.
And she is married to a former police detective who has an identical twin brother. So the three of them have this podcast, and they have detectives will come in and unpack cases that they were involved in. So that was like a starting point. And then I did research, and I, went to newspapers.com and looked, back as much as I could about, certain, whatever information I could get at the time period. But those were really good resources for me.
Yeah.
Those are great. And obviously you're no slouch at doing research because there's so much baked into To Cherchez la Femme, like just this kind of deep knowledge of history.
I will say, somebody had asked me as an attorney, how did that help my writing? And I thought, I don't really know that it did, but I know how to do research.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know you also grew up in Paterson as well. So what was that like, getting to like write fiction in the place that you like lived in real life?
Well, I was born in Paterson, but I didn't grow up there. My
Oh,
mother
sorry.
and my grandmother grew up there, and it was, literally the next town over. I think you have to, there's that balance, sometimes, and I don't know if you find this, Hallie, with writing about LA, where you want a particular place, but it doesn't exist. You want a restaurant on this street, but there is no such restaurant. Or you want
Mm-hmm.
to talk about a restaurant, but you're going to say something negative, so then you change the name so that nobody can say, "Oh, you said this bad thing." So it was a combination of being where I could use actual locations and actual names. I would try to do that because it made it more accessible for me, and it will make it more accessible for readers. But there were
Mm-hmm.
times where I just had to make stuff up.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And you do kind of touch on some other of the like the historical events that were happening there, and with like the textile industry and stuff. How did you pick like which things you did want to include, or were there just some things that like felt like, oh, this would fit well with the story I'm telling?
I think it was an interesting book to write. The first three chapters, and this has never happened to me, and I don't think it'll ever happen to me again. But the first three chapters really just came out, structurally the way that I wrote them. I mean,
Mm,
I obviously did edits on the chapters themselves, but that those three chapters, and I just really felt a rhythm.
mm,
And I don't do an outline, but I do know where the story arc is going to be,
Mm-hmm.
and I do know what the
mm-hmm.
ending is going to be. I always knew what the ending was going to be, so that really helps me in terms of how I move forward.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So the other thing, it is like super hot here. So I was kind of excited that it was snowy and cold. Was that something you always envisioned too, or was that as you kind of like read more Nordic noir, did it kind of feel like, well, I'm gonna have to, or I'm gonna add some snow?
This is loosely based on an actual crime, and that's when it happened.
Oh yeah, that makes
Can you tell
sense.
us a little bit about the
So I
actual
just,
crime?
pardon me.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were in the midst of
No, no, no,
saying.
no. I didn't hear. I
Oh,
didn't hear
I
the
was going to say I want to
question.
hear more about the actual crime that it's
It
based
was,
on.
it was just a straightforward bar shooting, but for some reason I had thought, because I do like to start from a place of fact, because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like then that's the kind of crime fiction I like to write, which is this could actually happen. You have to have enough, evidence and collecting and all the various things that will move a novel along. It
Mm-hmm.
can't be, well, we found one piece of evidence and we solved the crime. But at the same time, I like to be close to, you could pick up a paper and this would be the crime that you would read.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to, find that. And then it was basically just a bar shooting. And I
Mhm.
added, the various characters, because it was like
Yeah.
it was a single homicide. I did a double homicide, and then everything else was completely fictional.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
But it just was like, oh, there was a bar shooting. What would happen if this happened? And it just
Yeah.
happened to be, that time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's cool.
But you're right; it is like a
Well,
little
yeah, so
refreshing.
that's good, because I think from now on I'm going to say, well, I always wanted to write, Nordic noir, and
Yes.
therefore I made it cold. So
Yeah.
as I go along, the next time that I get that question, I'm going to be much better on that.
I gave you a new answer.
Yes, I like yours better than mine.
If you're an author, chances are high that you just want to spend your time writing and maybe reading, not thinking about social media, what to create, and what to post. And the good news is, I have a solution for you. With just 3 hours of in person filming, you can receive 90 days or 3 months worth of social media content. The content is a mixture of videos, photos, edited reels, and when you receive the content, you also receive a PDF that's a content calendar that links to all of the content, tells you exactly when to post it, and gives you an option for captions. And if you've ever felt like you're tired of just talking about your book all the time, We will help you come up with ideas that are general content for your page that's not just all about your books. If you are tired of thinking about your social media presence and just want to get back to writing, check out the link in the description. It was a little bit crazy for me too, because I read your book and then I read Our Last Resort by Clémence Michelon right after, and it references Paterson, New Jersey. And I was like, I've never heard of this place, and now I'm hearing about this like waterfall twice.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was the name of the book that referenced?
It's Our Last Resort, and it's by Clémence Michelon. I can also send it to you too after this.
Oh yeah, no, I know, because I'm always just so interested when it pops up, because it's so, to me it's obscure, but
yeah, it's not the like whole setting. It jumps back and forth, but in the past timeline, there's some stuff there.
Paterson's having a moment. There was also that Adam Driver movie.
It's funny because for a city that's really in the shadow of Manhattan and certainly past its heyday, it's really been a muse. I mean, George Tice, who is a photographer that is known outside of Paterson. That was his first show. It was called Paterson. It was at the Metropolitan in Manhattan. I mean, it's just you wouldn't expect that.
Yeah.
And then there was the film by Jim. I always get his name wrong. Jim Jarmusch.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wonder, like, why Paterson?
Yeah.
Paterson, the muse of New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Clearly. Did you have another question, Halley? Yeah.
I was going to ask you, so you mentioned the Nordic noir. Who in particular were you reading that spoke to? And I really want to return also to that question, or to what you said about the way that Nordic noir place is so pivotal and important, and like hear a little bit more about your thoughts about that.
So I had started reading I think the first that I had read, the girl with the dragon tattoo, like way back, but it wasn't like a genre that I was really reading a lot of. And then I, started reading Department Q, which I loved so much.
I'm reading the first book right now. Yeah.
Oh, are you? Are you enjoying it?
Very much.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. He's a great voice. I love his voice. And I read that. I'm trying to think. I read some of the Henning Mikkel, the Wallander series. And then I started reading the Martin Beck series, which was actually the first. Like they were I think you and I had talked about it, the Laughing Policeman. So that's Amaj Cheval and Pierre Wallou. And I was so careful when I say their names. And, it's so funny because one of the reasons I didn't start with them, I was like, oh, it's in the 60s. It's probably not as current. And it really is. Their work is not dated at all. And I felt like that was because they were true police procedurals, and they're very, very structured, very, very geared to society and critiques on society, but still, very accessible.
Yeah.
Their on society are not like smeared all over the text. It's just subtle.
No, it is. And Kate, I don't know if you've read these books, but they were written by, I believe it was a husband and wife team, or at least a romantic partner team.
Yes.
And back in the 60s, the Martin Beck books, and basically each book they took like a social issue that was facing Sweden and kind of found a way to like build a plot around that. And so there's 10 of them, and they're these like you said, like very procedural, but like very interesting and still like amazingly current, prescient books that like really use crime fiction as a vehicle to like talk about social justice and social concerns.
That's awesome. Yeah. What's interesting to me is it was just reminding me when you said it was a husband-wife duo. Isn't that what Una-Lena is as well? I think.
Oh, I don't know.
I think Lars Kepler is like that actually. So yeah, there are some cool there's some cool noir writing partnerships going on there, but that's really cool. I need to check those out for sure. Yeah.
So I'm still fascinated. So tell me more about like the way that you see place in Nordic noir like setting, and like how that was so impactful in a way that you wanted to translate it into Nightswimming and the Jamie Palmieri books.
Well, I think it was giving me permission to do a little bit more than, this is what the street looked like, because Paterson, especially, in the 1970s, it was so rich in terms of its Rust Belt, existence. But I wasn't writing about that. I wasn't writing about, the textiles, and that had nothing to do with what I was writing. But I still felt it was very important to the story, because it was really about how are these people living, what's going on in their society. So it was, I guess it just gave me permission to go a little bit deeper into the the location, rather than just the brushstrokes of, well, this is the street. I'm going to describe the house so you know what it looks like, which I think is very important. I mean, I love that that texture in a novel.
Absolutely.
But I really wanted to think about the society, and I also wanted to think about what was it like to be a male in that society.
Right.
And that was not intentional until it was not something I thought about until after I wrote the book, about what it was like to, because somebody had said, well, why didn't I write a female in the 1970s, because you would have, and my answer was, one, I didn't think about it, but two, it was like I really didn't want to do that, because then it was always the elephant in the room, right? If you're writing about a woman who's a police officer in the 1970s, you're going to have to talk about, the pushback, the sexual harassment,
right,
the promotion she didn't get. And I was like, I just want to write about the crime. And I also, to be fair, that's already been covered very well by a lot of other writers. Right. So it's not, I'm not dismissing it as it's not interesting and nobody should tell that story, but I just felt like that story has been told, and it wasn't the story that I needed to tell.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It makes me think of something that an author I really like, and I might have said this to you already, Melanie, in a separate chat, but there's this author I really like who lives in Southern California named Todd Goldberg, and he talks about setting is like intertwined with character and plot, because setting begets character, which in turn begets plot. Like where you live forms part of who you are, which necessarily forms like what sort of crimes would be perpetrated and how somebody would react to them. And you kind of can't disentangle those three, is his point. And I think that's really true. And I think that's kind of a version of what you did with Jamie Palmieri's with the book, and also what you were just saying.
It is. It's very interesting. And it's also the reaction, and particularly with crimes against women. One of the pieces I had written about in Substack was about a rape of a young woman in it was in 1901, or actually it was 1900, and 1901 was the trial. And it was just so interesting to me because of one, I was surprised that there were actual convictions of the men, because there were very prominent men in Paterson. But two, the information that was allowed to come into court, and the way that attacking her virtue, for lack of a better word, and her past, and what was she doing out that night, was fair game.
Yeah.
So so how that crime was received in society was really interesting to me, because that was very much a different society than what we have now.
Yeah. Although I would argue that still comes up.
In the 1970s, that was very transitional.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Right. And I think that's what you're so interesting. I think your book is set in 1979. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. And so you're sort of not only on the cusp of a decade, which I think we like to think of historically decades as these very clean things, like the 70s are very different from the 80s, but you really are living in this transitional moment, kind of coming out of the radical 70s, and then very soon we're going to be into the hedonistic 80s, and you're kind of straddling that point in your books you're writing. And I think that you bring that to life really well. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I also think so much of the movements of the 60s and 70s were really the movements of the two coasts, right? And what was going on in college campuses, and then the 70s, it really became the bread and butter conversation, the kitchen table conversations, and things were changing at home. So I that is a part of the 70s that is interesting to me, because all of a sudden things that were just going on that you would read in the paper are now being lived in your community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I feel like there's also there's a lot of paranoia in the novel in kind of multiple different ways. So it's kind of like you were saying, even the willingness to trust the police or government officials was there as well. But then also Jamie gets to a point where now like he's kind of being hunted too, so he's like very paranoid. Was that like thematically kind of there for you from the beginning, or did it kind of develop as you wrote it?
That I would have to say developed as I wrote it. As I said, I
Yeah.
knew the first chapters were very clear to me, and I always knew where it was ending.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think that is one of the joys of writing is you might think about a scene and you think, I'm just not sure if this is going to work. And then as you start writing, things just come to you. There's this. I think Ann Patchett calls it the loam in your brain, where
Mm-hmm.
like somebody who was your second grade teacher suddenly would be a great character as the neighbor in the novel. All of this stuff that's just rattling up there, and in that case, that those pieces just came together. That, well, how would this work, or what would be interesting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense.
It does make
The
sense. It is like a weird little magic moment. Sorry, Kate, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
you're totally
Where
fine.
your brain like feeds you something and you're like, oh yes, perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because it wasn't like I thought, like I don't know where it came from, but yeah, I think that's probably why somebody came up with the idea of the muse, all those
Mm-hmm.
years back, because
Mm,
they didn't know where they were getting these ideas from, but they were just, popping up. So
Yeah.
yeah,
that's a
so
really
I
good
think that's
point.
been going on.
Yeah.
But it certainly worked for me at various points in the novel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So the other thing I saw is that it is one of three, or that it's going to be a 3 book installment. Was that because like you had three really specific crimes you wanted to write, or like how did that part come about?
I think it was a combination of there were two different you know crimes or scenarios that I wanted to explore, and I also felt that Jamie was somebody who had more. There was more to his narrative arc that I could still explore. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't think I could do like a 20-book series. I didn't think
Sure.
that
Mm-hmm.
would work for what I wanted to do with the novel. But I do think that for 3 books, and I really enjoyed the characters. I mean, it was just you
Yeah.
know it's hard to just like leave a character and then just start with new. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
eventually you have to do that as and I've done that before in different pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But I just thought if I could stay with Jamie a little longer, it would be fine with me.
Yeah. And you like since this one has so much like we've been talking about like research and like understanding of all of it, it's kind of like everything is so fleshed out, so I'm sure it's like kind of not easier, but like you just will want to stay there longer anyway since you just like completely built out the world.
Well, you get comfortable for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that feeling, Melanie. I felt like, so my books aren't series, right? And so it was like, by the time you finish the first book, you're like, or you finish a book, you're like, oh, I figured out how to make this marriage work, like between me and the characters. And then you're done, and it's like, okay, you got to get divorced and marry someone new. And you're like, what? Wait, like we just got this one like ironed out. So I'm glad that you get to spend more time with Jamie, and I'm excited. I really love Jamie as a character, and as Kate points out, like the world is so fleshed out, and so is there anything you can tell us? I know you're at work on book 2. Is there anything you can tell us about it, or is it state secrets
I
for
don't
now?
know. It's so hard. I mean, even when I do readings, like I'm confined to the first chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if if you've had that experience, because I'm always trying, like, oh, like the first chapter, like, isn't there something more interesting? But you don't want to, like, you're just so confined by spoilers that you're like,
Right.
oh, I don't think I can do that. I think Jamie will be back, and I think it'll be interesting. But
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
what you were saying, it's funny because Jamie actually came as he was the outtake from another novel.
Oh,
And I
amazing.
think everybody says, like, oh, everyone starts with that novel that you write that ends up in your drawer.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that novel, but I was so stubborn. I was like, oh, no, 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 this is not going to end up in my drawer. This
Yeah.
is the novel that I'm meant to write, and it has to be out there in
Yeah.
the world. And it wasn't a crime novel. It was a very quiet novel. And Jamie was just somebody from the neighborhood, and
Hmm.
eventually even I got bored going over this, trying to make it work. And I just liked Jamie as a character, and that was where the inspiration was, well, maybe I could do something with Jamie. And since he was a police officer, the next thought was, well, then it has to be a police procedural.
Yeah.
And then the next
That's
one
so
was,
cool
I
and
couldn't possibly
unique.
do that.
Yeah. I love that. That's kind of magical too. Like when they just come from another place and create something. I've only had, you've mentioned that, and Marjan Kamali, who wrote, well, she's written multiple things, but The Lion Women of Tehran. She had the same experience where like the main character was one that she was just writing like a contemporary fiction, and then it turned into this like sprawling historical fiction that extends to the present. But that's so cool when they just kind of become their own thing.
And it's nice too, because then I imagine you'd already built out, I mean, you're writing about a real place and a real time, but you're also creating your own version of it, right? And so you'd already, in that previous novel, built out a version of Paterson that I imagine you also got to like live in and keep using.
I was comfortable. That is a good point. I was definitely comfortable being there, so it was easier to just do other things, in terms
Yeah.
of, getting up to speed in how do the police work, because in terms of world building, some of it was done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned earlier that you're not an outliner. Me either. So high five on chaos demons.
Yes.
But what I'm thinking about is like with a series, 3 books, you also have a challenge of you're writing each individual book in the series, but then you also have like an overarching character arc, right? Like you're kind of, there's these things that you have in the background, and you've put some of that, I can imagine where some of that is going. But I'm curious about, you said how your books end. Did you know how the series ended, or which place you wanted to get Jamie to without giving away too many spoilers? Just curious about how you think about that, where you kind of have both the like individual book arc and also the series arc that you're playing with throughout these books.
Yeah, I think I kind of just, separately from how he exists in the novels, I kind of know what Jamie's life will be.
Yeah.
And where he's going. So that's just sort of like, that's just my working knowledge. And then I go forward in the books with this is what's going to happen here, and this is what's going to happen in the next novel. So yeah, but I don't outline, but there's certain things that I do need to know.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm not a complete pantser. Like I have, even before I started writing book 2, I had a lot of notes, and it wasn't just research. It's like, this is what's going to happen. And same with book 3, like I'll be researching. I spent a lot of time on newspaper.com, and I'll be researching for book 2, but I'll see something about book 3 and pull that out and just do a couple of notes on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. I'm actually much the same, where it's almost like you have little like tent poles that you're writing to. So it's maybe not like the full arc, but you're sort of like, I know at some point this will happen. I know this is probably the big emotional beat, like those sort of things.
Yeah. The other thing I read in the article, the Crime Reads article that your publicist sent over, was about how you kind of noticed with Nordic noir that it's really sparse language, but like it's just like still getting the point across so well. And obviously, like, I love descriptive writing sometimes, but also like sometimes I really just love being able to like read through exactly what's happening, and it's like it was still atmospheric. Like I had a sense of where I was too. But did you kind of naturally gravitate to writing towards that way, or was that kind of like for the sake of the genre or the procedural genre too?
I think my writing, and that was always, I had a very nice MFA experience, so I'm not knocking MFA, but I will say I'm a very, plain vanilla writer. And so when I was in my MFA program, I would write these beautiful metaphors, and then I would come back the next day and go, "Who put this in? Like, why is this here? This doesn't sound like me." So yeah, I think that's just how I write. And I love poetry. I love writers who can do interesting things with their sentences, but that's just never been my natural go-to. That's not my comfort place as a writer.
It's so funny that you call yourself a plain vanilla writer, because I do know what you mean, right? Like, not your prose is not super purple, but I felt like the whole time reading your book, I was so impressed by your prose that like it's so punchy, and it does the thing. I think what you're doing in your work is the thing that's actually harder, where it seems simpler, but it's actually carrying so much weight, and we're getting so much from it without it being this kind of verbose, paragraphs of description. Like, I was so impressed by that, and I actually wanted to ask, like, teach me, Melanie, how do we do this?
I think you said it better than me.
I do spend too much time. I'm very obsessed with transitional sentences and finding the right word. I spend too much time on that. I wish that came natural to me.
Well, either way, it reads absolutely beautifully.
Well, thank you.
It does. It really does. I can't wait to read the next one.
Oh, well, I'm going to have to.
You'll have to wait.
Roll up my sleeves. Yeah, no. So now I'm in the editing, but I actually like editing because then you can just start it. Oh, I can make this better.
Yeah,
yes,
totally.
It's not starting from nothing.
Yeah. So do you have a full draft that you're editing now, or like where are you in the process?
Yes, I actually do have a full draft. So
that's great.
I'm on schedule with that.
That's good. Do you have any other questions, Halley?
No, I think we got most of mine. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I was asking if you had a question because I do always ask at the end if you've read anything recently that you've loved.
Anything recently that I loved? I read, and this has been sort of like a go-to for me, or to be read, was The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, which I've never read.
I haven't read it either, but what was it? It's one of those very similarly.
I just loved the language. I just thought it was just really engaging, and it was just one of those books that always pops up on, you should be reading this, you should be reading it. And I've never read it, so I did read that. And I just started a nonfiction that I always get wrong. I always say it's The Long Goodbye. I think it's called The Big Goodbye.
About Chinatown?
Yes.
Yes.
And so I can't say that I've finished it, but so far, like the early chapters, I'm really enjoying.
Yeah, so I've read that book. I believe it's Sam Wasson, and it's about the making of the story of Chinatown. Great book. I'm excited to hear your thoughts about it at the end. I have a tiny story about that book, which was that the last time I visited a bookstore before the 2020 lockdowns of COVID, I went to Chevalier's in Los Angeles, and I was in there. And oh gosh, why can't I think of his name? This is going to bug me. My brain is working slow today. Better Call Saul, the main actor.
Oh, Bob Odenkirk.
Bob Odenkirk pops into the bookstore, just me and him, and I'm like frozen. I don't have that many LA Hollywood stories, and he pops in and he's like, oh, he grabbed that book and he was like, has anyone read this? Is it good? And he's like, Chinatown's my favorite movie, and so he bought it, and I was just like, just be cool, but just so you know, we're in good company with Bob Odenkirk.
Oh, that just makes it even nicer. Yeah, just to know that I'm reading something that is being shared by very interesting people. And I, it's funny, as I was reading it, I was like, this is something that Halley would read. Yes.
Oh, for sure.
It's your territory.
Yes. So. Yeah. The whole behind the scenes Hollywood thing and the crazy story of that script coming together. I mean, it's a very interesting read.
I felt that I really needed a nonfiction because I'd been reading a lot of crime and a lot of fiction, and I just felt, I like to break it up, and it had been a while since I'd read anything good. So I for some reason that I don't even know where that popped up in my, I'm going to read this now, but it did, and I'm enjoying it.
I'm glad.
I need to read it now.
You really do, Kate. It's excellent.
Convinced me. Yeah. I always want to know some of this. It is a very Halley book. If I had stumbled upon it, I would have been like, maybe Halley read this. Oh, I love it. So Melanie, you said you're not a social media person. Is there anywhere people should follow you? We'll put the Substack in, obviously.
Well, I have my Substack. I'm starting on Instagram, so
nice.
I think I have 7 followers. I don't know, but I'm hoping but I also I'm never on Instagram, but I want to go on because I've had some very, very nice feedback from my novel, and I just feel like I want to contribute back. So that's been lovely. That's been a goal, is to become a little bit more social media. And speaking of social media, so my last Substack was about my friend's mom, who had given me some information about Paterson because she grew up in Paterson.
Mm.
She grew up, it was during World War II. So just a little bit, came into the novel. That's not a spoiler. And she subscribes to my Substack now, and she's 95.
Oh,
And I
oh my
thought,
God,
well,
amazing.
I just love that. I was like, that's my goal, right? That's aspirational. That when I'm
Yeah,
95, I want to be experimenting with new social media. So
absolutely.
Yes.
yeah. But to answer your question, so yeah, Substack, Instagram, and I have a website, and yeah, that keeps me busy.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. Well, I will put all those links in the show notes, and hopefully, we'll be talking about book number 2 in the series here in the future.
Well, this was great. Thank you so much. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. Great questions. Like, Hallie and I love to talk crime, so this is
Yes,
always fun.
yes.
Yes.
And
Always
it's
fun to
lovely
talk
to
crime
meet
with you.
you. Very nice to meet you, Kate.